do is I think we're going to need to move on. We've talked through our break. So why don't we go ahead and take 5 minutes?
I tell ya, I just had this happen yesterday. Being gone for 2 weeks.
Alicia, are you there?
Oh, I'm showing my sister. We think I'm down right now. Dad came out. My dad, I'm married, you know, but yeah, so they came in like 5 days, you know, wanted to check out, you know, and they get cards for Montana, Faribault, and now they have a Leroy card. And of course, they have fun.
Yeah.
Of course, they never had a SELCO card. You know.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so, you know.
Where do you want to stand? You want to
never been
over here, or do you want to go on?
I think I'm going to stick over here.
Okay. I'm going to hold mine. I'm actually taking this thing off.
Yeah, it's hard to say, no, you can't check anything else, but
It's harder when I'm not like because I know they're happening.
Yeah.
Or they're not going to get grades back.
Right.
They're going to learn how to read here, the grades aren't going to go up.
that's why, I tend to be maybe a little more wishy-washy than I should be. It's like, we have a $5 fine limit, and it's like, sometimes it's like, okay, you find there for $5. Do you really need to check out that movie? No. But it's just like, oh, I need to look for I do too.
I know. So I'll get back to this for you.
Kathy had they're getting a new kitty website. So she had a website meeting and she had kids put surgery, so she's in a booth. So this might be easier to pick up.
Okay.
No.
Your instructor.
They will close it on, I know we're going, so I'm hoping that people don't get messed up. But we'll see. I don't know what's going to happen. It is. In a week, so. Yeah, it was good. It was good. How about anything you know what's happening? We're looking for a tutor. The big city library. That's the only thing. They had a couple of people come in and look at the space, and they were to know when, what kind of timeline to make, to make changes, because the, building and the building weren't standing. In there and
all right, we're going to go ahead and try to get started again.
Thank you. Things like that. Just to kind of update. Yeah,
I read the.
All right. My colleagues, SELCO staff, and Allison from Public Library are going to talk to us about public iPads as an alternative to the computer.
Now, before we get started, I have to point out that this is a slightly momentous occasion because you are looking at the first user group presentation to be done through Google Apps. This is actually not a Microsoft PowerPoint. This is actually done through Google Drive. So if there's issues, bear with us. But just be aware, this is a little momentous occasion. So we're going to talk about public iPads as an alternative for the public computer. I had actually talked to Alice a while ago to set up this program, and what our goal was not to have them check out to go home or do anything like that. We're looking as a supplement to the public computer. Okay? In-house use. So as I said, it's an alternative to the public computer. Okay.
The idea here is we wanted to offer an alternate way to experience the internet, and we had a few reasons for doing that at Plainview. We have 3 small labs at Plainview, PC labs, and one of them is very low to the ground because it's meant for kids, and we have a teen area that is on high top, and then the place that adults would normally go is very tight. We have 5 computers, excuse me, put into a very tight room. So when we have people with wheelchairs or cats, it requires a staff member to remove a chair in order for them to get in there. So that was one issue that we wanted to address. We wanted to find a way to get those people to the internet without the rigmarole that comes with trying to get them to our regular PC labs. And the other thing that we were looking at was the idea of mobility. Because our computers are so closely spaced, they're very tight, there's not a lot of privacy that comes with being on a PC at our library. So the idea of being able to take a iPad and move to a quiet place in the library seemed like something that we wanted to pursue. That means that this was very much a sandbox project. We didn't know. We didn't know who was going to be excited about this. We didn't know who was going to try it out. So we tried to position ourselves in a way that we could adjust as we started to see who was coming in, who wanted to do it, and why. Then we could adjust around that. So we had app request lists available so that people could let us know what they were hoping it was going to do. And we tried to talk to our patrons too and find out, was this what you expected? And the other piece we needed to look at was, would we allow people to take them home or would we keep them in the library? We only have two. And so we decided the best course would be to keep them in-house so that when people came in, they were readily available. And it also cut down on some of the ideas that we had about security and damage. If they weren't going to leave the libraries, we were able to watch and see what was happening with their iPads.
All right. So moving on, we're going to talk a little about planning for cost. And the thing that Alice and I found out is, initially you think I got by the iPad. I mean, that's kind of obvious. But the thing we found is there's actually more than just the iPads. There's the initial cost of the iPads, which are about $480, $500 a piece. But there's also an accessory budget. Alice was really proactive in getting accessories for iPads. She wanted them in cases with screen protectors. And so there was that cost associated with it. And then, of course, there was an app budget. Now, a lot of times I always try to prefer or steer clear to the free apps because that's a better way to go. However, there are some apps that we needed or that we liked that weren't free. And so when you go forward, if you want to start planning this, is think about having a little wiggle room for apps. And bringing that down is gift card versus credit card. What that means is with iPads, in iTunes, your iTunes account must be associated with a credit card or you can use gift cards. Because we were worried about the account possibly getting hacked, we purposely did not set it up with a credit card. We went with the gift card idea. So that way, as the library needed to buy apps, they would gift card themselves from another iTunes account and put it into the library account that way. So if it did get hacked or whatever, they might get the couple bucks that might be remaining in the account. All right. So when I first started talking to Alice about this, I actually compared this to our public computer because that was ultimately our goal. And there were three things that I identified: user restrictions, system reloading, and physical security. User restrictions, we talked about how we wanted to do this. And I know the library and Eau Claire kind of went a different route. But because they're in-house, we actually used, on the iPads, they actually have a place where you can lock down user restrictions and put in a PIN number. And we wanted to do that because we wanted to lock up the App Store. So we didn't want patrons buying apps or getting access to all that information. So we also locked down accounts, mostly for that reason, and also because we are using Find My iPad with these iPads so we can track their location. So we needed to lock the iTunes account for that. Now, the library in Eau Claire did something cool in the fact that they actually made the iPads open so the patrons could put in their own library account. Because we're in the library and because we have a set amount of apps and stuff we want to use, and because of Find My iPad, we didn't want to lose that connection to the iTunes account. Okay. So the next thing is what to do between patron use, and this is where system reloading comes in. It's not as easy as the public computers. We've had it kind of easy with disk protection, and you reboot and it wipes it. With the iPads, it's a little more of a manual process. And so what you can do is you can reset the iPad back to factory defaults. And in iTunes, you can actually create a backup, which is what we did. We created a master image of the iPad to have all the apps preloaded, everything configured. And so we'd wipe the iPads, put them into iTunes, and restore them. And Alice worked with her staff very well so that they're able to do this. This was the part I was probably most worried about, because it is not just a happens on its own kind of thing. Now, there are devices and things you can get to do that, but they cost a lot of money. And they're built for a bigger enterprise than 2 iPads. So let's talk a little bit more about physical security. Like I said, we want to keep this in the library. I mentioned Find My iPad. iTunes has the ability, when you link an Apple device to your account, that you can track it. You can actually go in and find its location. Another alternative that some libraries might be able to use, if they have it, are RFID tags. You could easily tag the devices so they won't be able to walk out of the library. And then also, Alice and I addressed this issue with checkout procedures. There are a lot of extra things that patrons have to go through to check out these devices, and there's a lot of nastiness that can happen in them if they don't follow the procedures, which we'll talk about in a little bit, actually next.
All right, for checkout, the first thing that we require is that you have to have a valid Minnesota license or ID and a fine-free library card. And we take those items. We put them in the back, and you do not get them back until the iPad has been returned. We also ask our patrons to fill out a borrower agreement. About this long. It just details the cost of everything that they're taking. It lets them know what the fine rates are. It lets them know what they'll be charged if it doesn't come back. It talks about all the rules around the iPad, and they sign this every time they check out. We have an age limit. We decided to keep it 18 and older. We may at some point look at maybe going 16 and older, because one of the things we found down the road, or as we started to put this into place, is that study groups like to have these. They like to go find a quiet corner, sit around a table. Not everybody has laptops yet, so they like to come and get the iPads and be able to sit, and everybody has access to the internet and can be participating in the discussion. So, and the other exception to this would be that if the person checks it out has a child, the child can use it, but the parent needs to be directly supervising. The iPad must stay in the building, and we have the, if it would happen to lock, we have the serial numbers logged, both here and at SELCO. And I'm going to let Mike talk just a little bit about Find My iPad.
Yep, like I said before, Find My iPad is basically, it links the iPad to your account. You can go into any web browser, log into your iTunes account, and it will track it. So that way, if it did leave the building, as soon as they took it home, put the iPad on their wireless, we'd have them. We'd know. And then we can track the location, of course, get the police involved. And the other reason we kept the serial numbers is so that way police actually use that information if they need to track it down, that we do have the serial number and can prove that it belongs to the library. Yes, Randy?
If they restore the iPad and send up with the new ones, it's still track it.
That's why we lock it down with user restrictions.
So, okay, but if they manage to get around it?
If they manage to get around it, it would deassociate from the iTunes account, but that's where the borrow agreement comes in, because in the borrow agreement, it's also written that if there's basically a $5 fine for every 15 minutes it's overdue, and if it does go missing, whoever signed it with their ID and stuff that we're holding gets what, ding, $650? So if they want to take it, they can, but they're going to get charged for it.
Okay, and then we went with a 4-hour checkout period. That's sort of, it's about half of our day, and we felt that that would give them a good chunk of time to do what they want to do, but still make it so a second person could use it that day. In terms of fines, we assess $5 for every 15 minutes that it's overdue. And so far it hasn't been an issue, except for myself. I did take one home to put my notes in, and it ended up being 6 the next day, so it was, 24 hours overdue, and I had
She owns
one
the
of those
650, yeah.
I hope you know someone at the system level who can waive your fine.
Not okay.
Yep, because you know diamond card.
All right. So moving on, let's talk a little bit about apps. I want to talk about what apps we chose and why. A lot of the apps we chose, because we did lock the iPad down, so we locked accounts out. In locking down accounts, it also means they can't do the native email app, because we've locked them out of that. So they would have to use webmail or other apps, like there's a Gmail app where they can sign in, or a Yahoo Mail app or a Hotmail app. And so the reason why we did that is we wanted sign-in, sign-out apps like Facebook and
Twitter, and Evernote. So it's really easy for them to sign into the app without having to use the web interface and get all the access without actually attaching to the core Apple ID. Of course, free apps, we always prefer those over paid for. In fact, I don't know if you have a lot of paid. There's actually one that we'll talk about. Social media apps, like I mentioned, Facebook and Twitter. A large use of this device, as I'm sure a few of you in the room who have these would attest to social media. I know Facebook and games like Dragon Veil and stuff are heavily used on the iPad. And of course, productivity apps. Stuff like Evernote, Dropbox, those are apps we use. Google Drive also, in fact, one of my favorite things right now is the Google Drive app finally allowed editing of spreadsheets. While that might be not a big deal for you, it's something my wife and I have been waiting for years for. So, and of course games, because what iPad or tablet, wouldn't it be cool if it couldn't play Angry Birds? And so of course a lot of game apps. One of the nice things Alice has put in place is she actually has an app request form at her library. So if patrons do have apps, they can actually suggest them for the library to add on to their iPads. But with great apps comes great responsibility. And so when we talk about restoring an iPad, the amount of data and apps that you have on the iPad matters. So if you actually load it with free ebooks or load it with big apps, you know, like say you put on iMovie so they can make movies, that's a big app. And so it actually adds a lot of time to the restore process. So when you go to wipe the iPad and restore it from the image in iTunes, it's going to take a lot longer. So that's something to keep in mind. Yes?
Can you give me just an estimation of what that time is now, currently?
After we did have a couple that we actually pulled off because of that issue. And once we did that, it's about 5 minutes to get it.
But it probably jumped up considerably.
Yeah.
I know some, when we were talking with Claire at their presentation at MLA, there were some apps and data that they had loaded that would add up to even hours on top of the restore process. So you want to be careful how much you want to bog down your iPad with the apps. All right. And of course, updates. Because what device wouldn't be cool or usable if it didn't come with updates? So there of course are app updates and there's iOS updates. iOS is sort of like Windows for the iPad. And so you have system updates. And typically what you do is you would update these apps and the iOS, and then you would in iTunes have to take a new backup image, a new master image. So that's something that you have to kind of stay on top of too. It's not just like you have one master image and you're set. It's kind of an ongoing thing.
That's something I do about once a month. Go in and update everything and redo the image.
All right, so this got its own slide because printing was a big deal. And printing from these are tricky, can be tricky, and there's lots of ways to do it. First off, printing from your iPad. It totally depends on your library setup. Is the iPad going to be on the same network as your existing printer? Okay. If it's in some cases where you're going to use the public Wi-Fi, which is separate from your library network, you're not going to be able to access those printers directly. One of the methods that's really cool if it's on the same network is Apple AirPrint. A lot of the newer printers come with Apple AirPrint enabled. And what that means is your iPad will scan the network, and it will find your printer, and you can print to it without having new drivers or anything. It's pretty straightforward. Another one I've talked about a lot, and this is good if you're on a different network even, is HP ePrint. A lot of the newer HP printers come with ePrint, and you can set it up, and what that does is it gives you an email address for your printer. So basically, if you can email it, you can print it. You can be actually in Australia, and you could print to the email address that would come out on your printer. The method that Alice and I found, because the printer they have does not support Apple AirPrint, and it is on the same network, we actually end up going with a print app, which is where the cost came in. And there are a lot of print apps out there that can do a little more than the native Apple AirPrint, and the one we used was called Print Magic.
Staff training. My staff was not experienced. None of them owned a smartphone. Nobody had a tablet with the exception of myself. And so we were very much starting from scratch. And I wanted them to sort of become comfortable with the iPad before we went too much further. So we started with essentially a petting zoo. It was hands-on exploration. I started with the game so that they could start to learn, you know, you can spread things and you can pinch things, and, you know, here's how you open an app and here's how you close it, and ooh, it's too loud, let's show them where the volume rocker is, and we just let them kind of play, and they got lots of time to do that. And once they were comfortable and kind of felt like they understood how a tablet works and how you use the basic interface, then we went on to the training piece. I made 2 docs. One of them was how to wipe and restore the iPads, and it was just detailed step by step. And the other was how to print. And those were really the only 2 functions that they needed to be concerned about, and that part went well. Just as long as it was detailed out, they were comfortable going through that process. What we found, the most popular use for our iPads is for those that are about to go to Rochester and purchase one for themselves. They want to come in, they want to play with it without somebody looking over their shoulder. They want to see what it can do. Not a good way to have ongoing relationships because they're going to go get their own, but it was a very popular use of our iPads. And then second most popular was the alternative to the public PC. We did have, as I mentioned before, the study groups that wanted to just, you know, have everybody able to reach the internet and be able to communicate with each other. And we also had a few people that liked it better. They liked it better that they could, like, email. For some reason, Google changed on one of my patron accounts. And at this point, I didn't know about Google because we hadn't made our conversion yet. And so there was something about her account, and she couldn't see what she wanted to see. It was a very odd interface. And we moved her to the iPad, and that ended up being able to fix her problem. So now she uses the iPad exclusively to do her email. Gaming turns out to be a very popular thing, particularly with our seniors. The drag and drop interface, the way that you can use tilt motion in the game was very appealing as opposed to coming in and using a mouse to play a game. And then we also ended up using it quite frequently for staff development. So when my staff has classes or things here at SELCO, then they can log into their Evernote account and use it that way. Some unexpected perks. Book clubs. We've had both adult and children's book clubs that have been very grateful that we have these iPads available. My adult book club, I have one that is very into looking into the background and the context of an era. So when they're having a discussion, this is a nice, easy way for them to look up politics and of the time and that type of thing without having to move everybody to a PC. I also had a kids book club that they needed to write a letter. So they were able to sit around a big table with the iPad and write their letter as opposed to trying to fit them into the lab. I have a chess club, and I frequently use these to provide some alternate activities, keep kids engaged, give them a little something different to do. And story times, we use them for things like timers on our New Year's Day countdown, or we also use them for music and videos to supplement the activities that the storytellers are doing.
So in conclusion, the question you have to ask yourselves if you're thinking about doing this, and I know a couple of you are, is an iPad program something for your library? Is it worth the cost? Do you want to keep it in-house like we've done here, or you want to think about maybe having it start to go home? And then, of course, the other thing is questions. Any questions? Yes?
Do any of the libraries have the wireless printer?
Yes, there actually are a few libraries. In fact, back in the back row, Susan Hart actually has an HPE printer at her library.
Because that's one thing I find very easy and frustrating at the Wabash library if I want to print something, but as at home I think it's quite.
Well, and the thing is, a lot of the HPE printers that come now do both Apple AirPrint and HPE Print, which is really great if you have an iPad and it's on the same, like, say, public network, you'd be able to AirPrint. But for other devices that can't do AirPrint, you have the email backup option too.
And how much was that app?
The printing app, I think, was, well, there's a free version, but we didn't want to do the free version because we didn't want to do ads. I think it was around $7.
$5.99, I thought.
Yep.
Yeah, it wasn't.
And that one is more like a regular network printer app. It doesn't do ePrint. It will actually find and work with a lot of modern printers. So that app might actually if there's a printer on the network on the wireless network you're using, might work for you. Yes.
You know, how often is it used? I mean, is it?
It goes out about, to actual patrons, it probably goes out 1 or 2 times a week, but with using it with our activities and our staff, they get used every day.
Just one.
So go ahead, Randy.
Mentioned a study, different approach we took. We wanted to make it available for kids, so we bought 3 iPads and fixed them to a table with these mounts and blocked wireless via the router, and they're using all the time. We put kids games on their educational stuff.
And that's a good way to do it, because the cost of, say, a kid's game on a computer, I went through this with my mom, and it's one of the reasons we got her an iPad. She didn't have to pay so much for Mahjong. A computer version of a regular game is going to run you maybe $10 for the cheap version. The app for the iPad is going to be free, or maybe 99 cents to $2. So when you're talking software, it actually is cheaper to go the iPad route.
My question for Al, now that you've had this year or so, right, of in-house use, are you thinking about checkout out of the building, or you don't see the demand?
We've had a couple requests for it, but with that price tag, I am not ready to send that out of the building.
Yes.
Yeah, just a comment. I was recently up at the airport, and in the G concourse where the international flights come in, and I walked in and I saw these iPads all over the place, and I thought, well, this is cool. They've got the menus for the restaurant on this. But part of it was, but then the rest of the concourse, they're just public iPads. And you don't have to pay to use them. You walk right up to them. They're affixed. They're permanently affixed. But, yeah, it's just incredible. And so I think we're going to start seeing them more and more places.
Oh, definitely.
Well, thank you. Just a little behind schedule, so we're going to just jump right into the next presentation. Cheryl is going to talk to us about RDA and where we're at.
And behold, the second PowerPoint to be used at users.
This is the advantage of having your office be next to mine. All the cool things. I get all the cool toys. And not only that, but look at the wonderful built-in theme that Google offers. And so if you're not familiar, this is a Star Trek The Next Generation theme, not the old one, The Next Generation. And the subtitle is also thanks to Mike. So he's to tie it in, you know. So anyway, so RDA could boldly go where no one has gone before. Well, no cataloger. So first I wanted to talk about a little history. Most of what I'm going to spend this presentation talking about is just the difference between RDA and AACR2 and what you all can expect in SELCO if you're a cataloger, and a little bit of sort of what this means for those who are non-catalogers and the way things are changing. So RDA stands for Resource Description and Access. It's been around since a long time. 2003, 2004, I remember hearing about it when I was in library school. But it was called AACR3 then. So now it's called Resource Description and Access. It is the successor to the Anglo-American Cataloging Rules 2nd edition revised. It is based on FRBR, which stands for the Functional Requirements for Bibliographic Records, where AACR2 is based on the theory of ISBD, which is all about describing what you have. FRBR is about relationships between data. And it's more based on a relational database. It's trying to mimic a relational database, which is what we have in Horizon. So you're going to see some functional changes with data and how data interacts with each other and how data describes each other. So where do you get RDA? It's primarily through the RDA toolkit, which you do have to pay for. There is a print version. It is not being updated very often, if at all. I'm not sure if it's being updated at all. But the toolkit is updated all the time. So you do have to access that and pay a fee. I think it's about $300 a year, if I remember correctly, for one person simultaneous access. And it's a great resource, actually, because it links you right back to the AACR2 rules. It allows you to put in local workflows. It has a whole bunch of information in there. So the history, a little bit more on the history of RDA is, like I said, it's been around for a long time. In 2010, I believe, there was the RDA test. This was approximately 26 libraries, including the national libraries, so LC, the National Ag Library, and the National Library of Medicine. They got together and they said, okay, we've been talking about this thing. We may or we may not be moving to this. We need to see if it's really practicable and if we can actually apply this to libraries and if there's a benefit to it. So they did a test, and they said yes. In 2011, in June, LC announced that they are going to fully implement to RDA by March 31st, 2013. So that is rapidly approaching, and they are on track so far. I know that the catalogers in this room have been seeing more and more RDA records, and that's because LC and all the PCC members, so all the Program for Cooperative Cataloging, those big libraries out there, that program is run by LC. They are all switching to RDA, and they are all starting to train their staff slowly to RDA. So you're starting to see more RDA records in OCLC. So why did LC decide to switch to RDA? The big reason was fuller integration with the wider information world. In other words, our data will not be siloed in Horizon. You won't just be able to access it through our Aqua browser or our enterprise. Our data has the potential to be out there in the internet, out there in other databases. But LC said they have you can go read their whole report of their test is on their website. One of the things they said was that this whole relationship model fervor, the whole new way of looking at data, won't be realized through MARC. That the MARC format has been great for us for the last 50 years, but it's time to start thinking about a successor to MARC. But that successor must be backwards compatible because we have over 9 billion MARC records that exist in the world. So we can't just move off of something tomorrow. So what they did, the Library of Congress hired somebody who's well known in the semantic web field. They put together an initiative called the Bibliographic Framework, and they have been working on developing a successor to MARC. And this is where the exciting stuff happens, because the successor to MARC looks like it's going to be something called linked data. So what is linked data? How they described it at the MLA conference I was at, I think Carla did a good job of describing it. It is, think of your MARC record and cut up all the pieces and throw them up in the air and connect them together. And then, so it's a big web of data. It's everything connected together. And I'm going to show you an example here, because one of the things that WorldCat has done is they have gone through 1.5 million of their MARC records and have converted them to linked data. So here's Gone Girl, a particularly popular novel right now. My book club is reading it, that I never go to. So if you go all the way to the bottom, here is linked data. So this is something, you can see that you should see familiar parts of the MARC record in here, right? You've got your subjects, you've got your titles, there's the BizAc headings right there. You've got all sorts of parts of your MARC record that are basically being used as hyperlinks, as web links. And so what this enables data to do is interact with, say, Google differently. So I don't know if this will work. So say you look for one of my favorite people in the world here. So this, on the right, is actually pulling linked data, because Wikipedia loyalty. So you can see here this linked data. This is Google utilizing linked data right from Wikipedia. I don't know where it and see. Also, Google uses all sorts of linked data. Okay, you can even search by recipes. And let's say I want a Wardell salad that does not include grapes. It is using linked data to pull all that information and reutilize it. So think if you did a search for Prince William and your linked data was being linked to Wikipedia from OCLC, you could get, oh, did I spell it? Oh, I'm still in the recipes. There are no recipes for Prince William. So if Google starts using, or I should say when, because they will at some point, start using the linked data in WorldCat, and your holdings are in WorldCat because you've undergone the reclamation process, you could potentially have your library's holdings show up right here on the right-hand side and say, oh, you're looking for a book on Prince William? Well, guess what? Visiting Rhoda Public Library has 4 books on Prince William, and here they are. So that's the potential.
They've all been thinking.
Yeah, they're all just in my house. So that's kind of the potential of what linked data could do. But I could do a whole presentation on linked data, so I'm going to move on. There's some more information about linked data at the end of the slides where you guys can go out and read. But it's really exciting because it really has the potential to change how we interact with the public, bring more and different people to our libraries through this new way of data.